I don't know what to say to that.
We got 3 in the room. Let's go ahead and get started. Senator Ellis, you can vote from the back chair there. Let's get started because we have a 1:15 drop dead deadline back on the Senate floor. Are we live? Okay, good. Representative Lawley, you will have this bill. Forward. Welcome to you and to our chairman of House Minerals.
Thank you, Chairman Dockstetter and committee. It's good to see you again. I've missed you from our time in the interim, but I want to present to you this afternoon House Bill 32, which passed the House with no amendments. So it should look very familiar to you. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to talk about the bill and what it does, or whatever your pleasure is.
Let's go ahead and have you give just an overview.
Okay.
Refresh everybody's memory up here at the table and those in the room. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you'll remember, we spent a good bit of time on this bill in the interim together, and I worked on the work group that focused on some of these statutory changes. But let me just say this, that it is a bill that offers some necessary technical changes to the Wyoming's longstanding state law regarding the use of underground geological storage space in projects. Basically, the bill has 3 main purposes that it seeks to accomplish in amending the current statute. Number 1 is to ensure that Wyoming private landowners are fairly and equitably, compensated for the use of their underground pore space or storage space that we call pore space. And then to clarify the roles in the Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality and the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission.
Just as you go ahead and say page 2, page 3 like that.
Okay, you want me to go through the bill by page?
Just a quick flyover.
Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, so really you don't see any changes until we get to page 3, where we basically talk about the construction of injection wells on lands and the applications and what's authorized there. And then at the bottom of page 3, we talk about underground injection control on class 3 wells. So some of this is just correcting some language, technical language. Basically, one of the things we added here that I think is important, at the bottom of page 3, it starts with the phrase to facilitate the use and production of Wyoming energy resources. And we added there, and to the facilitation, to facilitate the unitization of pore space for geologic sequestration. And then we go down on page 4, and we begin to do something very important to protect landowners, in that we define in these amendments economic benefit and what it means and what it doesn't mean. And so that it's very clear what that economic benefit is and how it is determined for landowners. We define the term unit area of the pore space. Again, if you want me to read it to you, I'd be happy to read it to you, but it's
That's
right
all
there
Go ahead.
on page 4, line 16. We then move on to page 5, and you'll see one of the changes on line 10 of page 5 has to do with this idea of draft permit. I don't believe the department, as I recall, issues draft permits, so we took out that language. And then we have a description of the pore space on page 5, Romanet number 2, and you'll see it there, a description of the pore space proposed to be included in the unit area and the corresponding surface lands. And these are things that are to be included in the application to the Wyoming Oil and Gas Commission. We've added in Romanet number 3, if federal pore space is proposed to be included in the unit area, then let's see what it says there, excuse me. One of the things they have to report is how much of the pore space might be owned by the federal government. I'm just moving through some small corrections here that we went through together. Let's see. think one of the more important things we did on page 8 is we require that the location of any identified and existing wells are included, whether they're previously been plugged or not, are included in an application. And let's see here, on page 8, line 21, the application outlines operations that will comply with applicable underground injection control class 6 well permits, draft permits, and any other environmental requirements. And again, and that the commission may rely on the class 6 well permit issued by the department to make the findings required under this paragraph. And then on page 9, one of the important things that's done on page 9 has to do with this method of allocating economic benefit, which we spent a good bit of time on. And so if you look at Romanet number 7, for the allocation of economic benefit provided provided by the use of the pore space within the unit area between the pore space owners, and then I direct you to the language there on line 23, that for the purpose of this paragraph, federal injection fees, federal lease payments, and other consideration derived from the federal leases shall not be considered an economic benefit, which again was an important thing in terms of protection of other landowners who were not private landowners. So again, moving on, we on page 11, again, we're talking about the application for the unit area and what kind of notices are required. And that's where we did a lot of cleanup in working with the Oil and Gas Commission, and with some of the language that was, it was a little bit confusing to follow who was doing what notice and when, and that process. And so we tried to clean up that a little bit so that it was a lot more clear who was going to play what role, who would give the notice, who the notice would go to, and things like that. So, and then on page 12, we have a provision that we inserted where orders for unitization issued under this section may accommodate and provide for the use of horizontal or directional wells that may penetrate the pore space of a separate pore space estate for geological sequestration purposes within the unit area. There was some discussion during our work group that whether or not this was already really in law, that they could already do this, but we felt that we should include it here just to be clear, since pore space is a sort of a new commodity, if you will. It's something that we're giving value to that didn't have value before, and it is unique in many ways, the pore space itself. So we included that there. So with Mr. Chairman, again, we really went through the statute and tried to clear up some things that were confusing. And then a lot of our focus was really, how do we make sure private landowners are protected in this process? Again, where we're creating new value, and how can we make sure that their rights are protected, and it's very clear what has to be done at each stage and where they are at each stage in the process. And in doing that, we worked with and looked at, as you'll see in the statute, that not only the Department of Environmental Quality and the role they played, but how that department interacts with the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and how they work together. And so I think it's, again, I believe that we did a good job of that, even all together did a good job of that, to really make this much clearer and more useful, even clearer for our agencies. I think you'll hear it's much easier for them to know what they do and when, and cleaned up some language that was very confusing.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Do you have a summary statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. One of the things is the last item that Representative Lawley finished with. This goes quite a ways to protect private landowner rights. And I think it's important to remember one thing we did not do, which was to change the estate split that then requires statutory unitization. It remains at the 80%, 20% figure that is already in there. So they would have to have 80% of the landowners sign on before they can do a statutory unitization for the other 20%. And it protects those 20%, they get the same benefits as the original 80. So I think that's important to remember. Sometimes it's what we do, but what we don't do that becomes important. So we've protected those landowners from that. One other thing we've also been able to, through this, link together the difference between what's in the pore space and surface acreage. And we spend a lot of time on that issue to resolve those, because the injection and pore space will be on a per ton basis, but to lease or buy the pore space, you're working on an acreage basis. And I think the committee did a fantastic job in linking those two and combining them, again, for the benefit of the landowner, the surface owner, and who owns the pore space, and also any company that wants to inject CO2. I think the committee did a great job on balancing those two areas of importance and really clarifies a lot of the statutes.
Thank you.
And with that, Representative Lawley will stand for questions.
We're gonna open this up now, and if you're just walking into the room or tuning in on the internet, we are in the Minerals Committee for Friday, February 23rd, hearing House Bill 32. Committee, questions for either one of these two at the table? Seeing none. Thank you. Let's go ahead and take anybody from the governor's office? Anybody from a state agency? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Tom Kropatch. I'm the State Oil and Gas Supervisor for the Oil and Gas Commission. I just have a couple brief comments. I think it's important to remember that this bill doesn't create the unitization statutes. Those already exist. An operator or an applicant could come in and unitize today in front of the commission using existing statutes, but we do feel that these changes clarify and streamline that process. From an agency standpoint, it does help us, does streamline and clarify what is required in from an applicant and what is allowed as far as notice and who gets that. And so I think from a perspective of the agency, we believe that this bill is helpful to move these through the agency, but we also think it helps all the parties involved as far as understanding what their part of the process is and where they have input on the application or subsequent matters that need to be addressed through unitization. So it's a complicated process, but I think this bill does help a lot from an agency standpoint to clarify.
Good with this? No specific changes?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for Tom? No, thank you, sir. Director. Pete, you can come up and sit on the side here. We're expediting. I'll come up to the table, Pete. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. With this bill, our interest is really just two things. One, a clarification that the agency does not issue draft permits. We issue permits. So there's some clarification of that in this bill. And then the other is—
Director, what page are you on with that draft?
Mr. Chairman, page 3, line 6.
3, line 6, okay.
And then on page 3, lines 8 through 14, it clarifies that there are two actions by the agency. The first is the issuance of the permit to construct the injection well. And then the second action is a modification of that permit for the actual injection of the CO2. So those were the two points of interest for the agency, and we have no—
Director, what would you suggest on those? What would you want taken out on page 8?
Mr. Chairman, we're not proposing to change anything. The language as is addresses the issues that we had with the bill.
Okay, and we're taking the word draft out, so you're good. Okay.
Yes.
All right, committee or director? Good. All right, thank you. Enough, appreciate it. Expedite time, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Pleased to be here with you today. Pete Obermueller with the Petroleum Association of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, support the bill as written. Appreciative of the work in the House, passed the House unanimously. With your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, because I'm familiar with communications that have been swirling around the Capitol regarding carbon and carbon sequestration, if you don't mind me backing up and just talking a little bit about why we need this bill
Please
and
do.
address
Just-
some of those things,
Please
because
just
they'll
drive
clearly.
it home fast, if you would, please.
I will, Mr. Chairman. First off, there's been a lot of talk about carbon sequestration not being tested or used, and we don't know what happens. Mr. Chairman, I would argue, and I think you all know this, but I think it's important to remind folks that there's probably nowhere else in the world that knows more about capturing carbon and sequestering it than Wyoming. We've been doing it for decades in Wyoming. In fact, a full quarter of the entire globe's carbon capture and sequestration happens here in Wyoming and has been happening for 40 years in your neck of the woods. And that's just straight carbon capture and sequestration. And that I'm not aware of any issues related to wildlife or livestock or plant life or any safety related issues regarding that operation for that long. Two, we have been capturing carbon and sequestering carbon for purposes of enhanced oil recovery for almost as long. Before carbon capture became sort of a national buzzword type thing, we were sequestering carbon in order to produce more oil. At the end of that process, the carbon is permanently sequestered. And there has been interesting claims that somehow injecting carbon means that producing more resources becomes impossible. Quite the contrary, injecting carbon helps us produce more resources. We've been doing it in Wyoming for decades, and I'm unaware. There is no empirical evidence that doing so is unsafe, that it results in some sort of migration to the surface of CO2 or any of that sort of thing. So, Mr. Chairman, the various rhetoric about the safety of CO2 in particular has been concerning to me. Wyoming has 485 miles of CO2 pipeline, and that moves CO2 from your neck of the woods all the way to the northeast part of Wyoming. And that pipeline has had zero reportable safety incidents in its lifetime. So, Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to back up a little bit of context for that. The bill itself we support. I just want to point out, for us, it's basically three things. It ensures that landowners are fairly and equitably paid. We're going to have projects. The director of DEQ has in front of him and his staff several applications for projects. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that if these projects are going to happen, that landowners are fairly and equitably paid. Two, it helps to clarify what the agencies can and can't do with respect to their permits and timing, which in turn helps us know what we can and cannot do when we have one permit and not the other, and vice versa. So under normal circumstances, Mr. Chairman, it's a pretty sleepy technical correction bill, but I want to just take a little extra time for context, and I would be happy to answer questions for you.
Questions for Mr. Obermueller? No, do you want to note any technical corrections beyond what we've already done?
Mr. Chairman, I think it's been covered pretty well. Maybe the only thing that's a little counterintuitive is the economic benefits part. And just as since we haven't talked about it prior to today for 6 months, just a quick reminder that current statute doesn't define what economic benefits are. It leaves it to Supervisor Kropatch's commission to figure out what those are and looking at the whole scope of economic benefits. What you all did in this bill and we support is narrow that economic benefits is only what accrues to the landowner who owns the pore space. And that is intended to make sure that on a private market-based calculation, that landowners who, for whatever reason, aren't part of a unit are paid fairly and equitably. Just reading that without that context may be a little bit confusing. It was to some of my members who weren't paying attention to it during the interim, and I want to just highlight that particular part.
Thank you. Any further questions? Sure, Obermueller, appreciate that. I'd like your opening points sometime when you get a chance to email those.
Happy to do so, Mr. Chairman.
Carbon capture and how we're well into carbon capture. It's not a new concept. Thank you.
Happy to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate it. Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else in the room would like to testify? Go ahead, sir. Identify yourself.
Good afternoon. I'm Connor Nicholas, attorney over at Bud Fallon Law Offices, and I was also on the writing team for this bill. Overall, I think this is a very good bill for landowners. I am an attorney who represents landowners for a law firm with landowners. When I first approached the carbon capture issue, I've represented about 750,000 acres worth of landowners, which comes out to well over 200 landowners who have been approached by various companies regarding carbon capture and storage in their pore space. And I had a lot of landowners ask me questions of what would happen if I don't get leased. What would I get paid? Could I be forced pulled into a project? What are the ramifications of getting a lease or not? And when I looked at the statute, there were enough questions out there of, I'm not sure. It seems like it's up to the agency interpretation. It hasn't been done yet. And so I had a lot of concerns with that when I began in this, I would say this field, because it is new when it comes to the pore space side of things. And so I think the statute and this bill really helps clarify a lot of the questions that a lot of my clients had when they had to make a choice about whether they wanted to lease their pore space or not. And I'll just highlight, I think this bill does provide a lot of help clarifying what a landowner's rights are and also what the responsibilities of the operator are. And so just as Pete had said, I think the bill clarifies and guarantees what a landowner will be paid, and it's doing so in a what I'd say an actual market perspective. I think that one thing I do want to highlight is that we specifically withheld any of the data that might be out there for federal leasing, and I think that that's a good thing for a landowner in a lot of ways, because a landowner and the federal agencies often have different priorities. If we do an average of what 80% of landowners think is a fair payment for a lease, and use that as what is remaining for whomever may not be leased at the time of unitization, there's a good chance that that's going to be a fair payment that the market has parsed out. If we were to bring in data of what the federal agencies do, that may skew against a landowner in a lot of ways, because there's different priorities that a federal agency may have, whether that's wanting to experiment on potential new projects, or even that the agencies may just think that carbon capture and storage is a lot more important than a landowner may have, where they're wanting to get the most value out of their pore space. And so I very much support the changes that we've made when it comes to the economic benefit analysis involved in it. The other thing I think that was really helpful in this in this bill is that it really helped clarify what are the notification requirements, not just for the project operator, but also what are the notification requirements if a landowner wants to be included in the project and they may be outside the current proposed area. And so I think that this bill really does a great job of providing clear rules that everyone can follow, and also allowing a landowner to be guaranteed to be a part of the game if they want to be.
All right, let's interest of time, is there anything specific you would want changed in the bill?
I think this bill is good as it's written. I don't think there needs to be any changes. I think this bill addresses most of the landowner concerns that I have.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Committee questions? Okay, we're going to move on. I appreciate that, though. You were well prepared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the room? Anybody else in the room? Got one on internet? Let's bring them on. This is Mr. Holt from Texas.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Holt, can you hear us? Okay, we don't need to, okay. All right, anybody else in the room? Anybody else on the internet? Let's just quickly ask the committee, are there any specific changes you would like to make rather than go page by page, and then we'll have you move it in just a moment, but any specific concerns? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My law firm is doing work for an entity that represents some of,
Gotta go
that would be
arm's
affected by
length.
this. I'll have a conflict.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. That being said, I'm going to ask for a motion on the bill, and then we'll just double check for changes. Moved and seconded. Did you get that? Okay. Any changes throughout the bill? This has been well vetted through the summer and through our House committee. Okay, with that being said, let's go ahead and take roll.
Senator Cooper. Aye. Senator Ellis.
Conflict.
Senator Jones.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Chairman Dockstader.
Aye.
Chairman, there are 4 aye and 1 conflict.
Thank you. For those who took time to testify, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and move to House Bill 33. You have Representative Conrad assigned to this one. Go ahead, Representative. It's all yours.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here and review with you House Bill 33, which is entitled Mining Operations Blasting Requirements. With that being said, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I just wanted to walk through the bill very quickly for you in the essence of time, and I can do that page by page if that's your preference.
I think at this time, we are down to just a little over 20 minutes before going back in. So would you give us the overview?
Yes, sir.
Not just page by page, just go ahead and give us the overview on this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Specifically, this is a needed bill that's based on public safety. That's more importantly been a collaborative effort between the miners themselves who are blasting as well as the community. Right now, there does not exist any mining regulations or statutes that relates to blasting in non-coal. So in this case, we talk about coal blasting, there's plenty of requirements and delineating lines, et cetera, but there does not exist any requirements, regulation, or expectations on the non-coal side. I share with you this, that 95% of our rare earth minerals are obviously procured from overseas, specifically China. With the development right now as we speak, there are around 50 new mines that are extracting, say, lithium, nickel, cobalt, uranium, copper, et cetera, that do require to blast to get that within the state of Wyoming. As we all know, the mineral revenues from that is extremely important.
Right,
So
you say
our-
50 mines within Wyoming.
That's correct,
Okay,
right
go
now
ahead.
as we speak.
Continue on.
So as we speak now, that requires some blasting to obviously extract those minerals. So what we're trying to do be as proactive, obviously working at the industry as well as the public, to ensure that they have some regulatory requirements they have to meet. That's in coincidence, that more importantly is reinforced with the Department of Land Quality, or Department of Environmental Quality, the Land Quality Division, that ensures that we actually have a set of guidelines, for lack of a better word, that ensures that blasting does not harm public and or structures, et cetera, so forth. So think of this as recently, there's a new gold mine near the Kurt Gowdy State Park, which is within earshot of the mine specifically. So we want to ensure that the protection is there, so we don't get into the position where we have liabilities, et cetera, so forth, where one claimant, maybe it's a residential area, has a structure that was recently cracked, say the foundation. So this way, that would ensure, and I should share with you, Chairman, within this document, more importantly, this bill proposal, is the addition of 1 FTE. This is for a mining specialist, more importantly, a mining engineer that has blasting specific requirements and education to ensure that those loads, those blasts are displaced, more importantly, sized appropriately to protect the public. This 1 FTE would be responsible for those 50 mines, which I just mentioned, throughout the entire state. There's been a lot of questions and concerns as it relates to the fiscal note. And I will share with you this data that I received from the Department of Environmental Quality. And I believe it's right here somewhere. There's over 4,000, and I'll let them clarify, but there's 1,000 or so at least new mines through the BLM they're asking for permitting. So the influx of mining in the state of Wyoming is very, very positive. We're excited about it. But as we look at the loss, unfortunately, of coal, these new rare earth minerals and mines that are coming to the state are extremely profitable for us. And more importantly, we want to ensure that the public is protected during blasting.
All right, questions for Representative? No further questions. You have any further explanation?
No, sir, unless question with regards to the fiscal note, I do not.
I'm trying to recall concerns last time. I don't. in the House committee the concerns were.
Specifically, the fiscal note. There is a perception out there, unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, that as it relates to the fiscal note for $502,000 over the course of 2 years, there is some perception, unfortunately and incorrectly, that that is the salary for this one person or one FTE we're asking for. That could not be further from the truth. In actuality, if you look at 0100, the value for that person with benefits is $138,000. Additional values there for $147,000 in year one to $47,000 is the purchasing of material, equipment, a vehicle to obviously to transport across the state, as well as at this point, 3 seismic pieces of equipment to ensure that we blast correctly. Continue on, there's a couple of minor issues there, but the total expenditures for year one, including salary, those pieces of equipment, as well as the vehicle, is around $301,000, dropping to $201,000 in year two, in this case, 2026.
Fair enough. All right. What were we doing, Representative Conrad, prior to this person with those 50 mines? We're just absorbing it into the state agency? What were we doing?
No, sir. Mr. Chairman, it's a great question. We weren't doing anything. So it was really a wild, wild west, for lack of a better word. There was no regulations, there's no requirements, there's no oversight, et cetera, unlike in the coal area, which we do.
Okay, and you just mentioned the projected growth again?
If I find that real quickly
Of these
for you,
mines.
there are 50 mines right now that we're aware of. That includes, as I mentioned, those specific minerals. And I believe, as I look at my notes very quickly, there was around 4,000, and I apologize, I don't have that, Mr. Chairman, but I would
Waiting
ask-
in the wings, 4,000
Permits,
permits?
permits.
Okay. You got a helper?
I do. At my 7 o'clock position, I'd like to, Mr. Whitland.
Would you get that off your glasses at 7 o'clock?
No, sir, I'm aware of my surroundings.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Kyle Wentland. I'm the administrator of the Land Quality Division at DEQ, and I can provide a little clarity here. Mr. Conrad, Representative Conrad is covering a lot of ground on this. So we have 50 mines right now that would require blasting and monitoring and blasting, and they're primarily in your quarry or deep bentonite type operations across the state. We're also seeing expansions in the aggregates and limestone and some of those as well. And then the BLM received, this is where the 4,700 number comes in. The BLM received 4,700 new claim applications in 2023 alone. That's the highest new claim filings in over a decade in Wyoming.
Repeat that, please.
The BLM,
2023.
2023, the BLM received 4,700 new claim applications for hard mineral across the state. And that's the biggest increase in a single year in over a decade in Wyoming.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can
Let's go ahead and open up questions to either Representative Conrad or,
I wanted to follow up with Mr. Wentland on that. What's a normal year?
I think, Mr. Chairman, that's a good question. This was at a joint meeting that I was at during the session here about a week ago. And the state director of BLM brought that number to us.
And Mr. Chairman, any particular breakdown, rare earths, lithium, do you know?
Mr. Chairman, the top categories were lithium, rare earth, gold, copper, and uranium.
It's going to be an interesting couple of years
I
ahead.
was going to say, we're kind of at a pivotal point then all of a sudden here. Okay. Committee?
Mr. Chairman, if I might, one more clarification point, actually two real quickly. With regard to the FTE, this person is also going to be training and certifying professional blasters across Wyoming. Right now, the coal blasting program is running that part of it, and an ideal class size is around 18 to 20. We're seeing those class sizes as high as 34 to 36. So we need to be offering more class sections. So this person and their experience is also going to be training and certifying blasters specifically in the non-coal sector.
Those kind of numbers, you got to keep it going. Okay. Yeah. Wow. I spend a lot of time in mines. They never let me blow anything up, but someday I'd like to.
And then, well, and to that point, Mr. Chairman, you don't want somebody with you need a fairly experienced person with on-pattern experience
That's what they said.
loading, decking, designing, and turning loose 500,000 pounds of explosives. So one last point, Mr. Chairman, and following the bill, there was a question in the Appropriations Committee on the House side with regard to reference to the National Fire Code, and I believe it's in page 5 of the bill. And there was wanting to make sure that that reference was broad enough so that we wouldn't have to go back in and change the statute. We did look at that in the interim, and the reference is correct, and the section that it references is the entire blasting provisions within the National Fire Code. You could make it broader. I certainly don't have a preference to this, but I would just say that we did look at that in the interim, and I believe the language is quite broad to cover that already without an amendment.
So we're good.
I think you're good.
Thank you. Further questions? Any three of these? Co-chair, would you like to put a cap on this, sir?
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you. It's a needed bill. The mine going in west of here, frankly, without some controls, depending on what they would do, you'd probably be able to hear it and feel it here in Cheyenne. So this protects the landowner. It protects the mining company because it gives them the opportunity to follow certain rules. Currently, call it the Wild West of blasting if you're not in a coal mine. So good bill, worked well in the interim. Yeah, that's
Thank
all.
you. Any questions for any of these three? Thank you, gentlemen. Director, do you want to say anything? Okay, right behind you, we have someone from the Mining Association certainly would like to.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Travis Detai with the Wyoming Mining Association, and I know you've got a lot of work to do, so I will be quick. We support the bill. I just wanted to relay something to you, if you would indulge me for 1 second. I got an email yesterday from the company that is developing the rare earths deposit in southeast Wyoming. They announced yesterday the completion of their institutional placement, which has raised $13.5 million. Members of the committee, this stuff is happening. And I would argue to you and to anybody else that this piece of legislation and the bill that you passed last night are probably some of the most consequential and important pieces of legislation to come out of this body. This stuff is happening. We're getting in front of it, and it's going to yield good fruit. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I want to thank you all for your work on this and the other piece of legislation over the interim. Thank you to Administrator Wentland and his great work. This is going to be good, and we're going to be doing good things in the industry.
Yeah, the administrator certainly brought it home for us just now. Thank you, appreciate that. Questions? Okay, good, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kelly Little with the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. I'll also be brief. Our members support this bill. We appreciate the increased statutory protection that the bill provides, the guidance, and a lot of our members are already abiding by these guidelines due to OSHA regulation, but it is just an extra layer of protection for our members that are operating these kind of mines. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
You reviewed the bill, any specific changes? We're good?
Nope, we worked on the interim with this, Mr. Chairman, and we are good with the bill as written.
Okay, committee, questions? Thank you. Anybody else in the room? Anybody else in the room? Do we have anybody on the internet? Zoom? Okay, good. Committee, let's move it and work it. Moved and seconded, okay. We can take it straight to the page if you'd like. Any specific changes? We're good. Any concerns at all? Any closing comments from the committee? Okay, good enough. Appreciate, Mr. Co-Chair, all your work on this. Thank you for sending it over that way. Yeah, long old summer, we got her done, almost. Not across the finish line yet. Okay, call roll.
Senator Cooper.
Aye.
Senator Ellis.
Aye.
Senator Jones.
Aye.
Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Chairman Dockstader.
Aye.
Chairman, 5-0.
We pass. Let's go back to Bill 1. Who would like to take that on?
I'll take that. I work.
Thank you. Who has an interest in this burdening, this rapidly changing world of this mining world that's going to change Wyoming as we know it? All yours. Okay, out of Southwest Wyoming. Got that? Yeah. Representative Jones, or Senator Jones, we're good, everybody? Thank you. Let's go back up. We'll give you a little time to take a health break and get back to work.